The clock in the kitchen clicked louder than it should have, each tick ricocheting off the empty walls. Jonathan sat at the table, with a bowl of soup gone cold, staring at the steam that had long since vanished. Across from him, the other chair remained untouched. His late wife's seat. He still set it out every evening, as though Margaret might wander in humming one of her old songs. He reached for the photograph propped against the salt shaker. Their son Rick, 17. Frozen in time with his graduation cap tilted sideways. Margaret's arm wrapped tight around his shoulder, her smile the brightest thing in the frame. Jonathan traced her face with the tip of his thumb, the ritual as automatic as breathing. That was when the phone rang. Not the cheerful trill of a text, not the muted buzz of reminders he always ignored. This was the heavy landline, the one that belonged to another era. The one that rarely rang since Margaret passed. Its sharp cry filled the small kitchen like a demand. Jonathan's hand trembled as he lifted the receiver. Hello. A pause. Then, a voice he hadn't heard in almost a year. Dad. Jonathan froze. The word slammed into him with the force of both ache and relief. He closed his eyes, steadying himself on the table. Rick. His boy. The last time they'd spoken, Rick's anger had cracked the walls of this very house, accusations flying. Doors slamming, money at the root of it all. A year of silence had grown between them, and Jonathan had learned to live with the hollow it left behind. Rick. He managed, his voice more fragile than he intended. I know it's been too long, Rick said quickly, as though the words might vanish if not pushed out fast enough. But Emma and we've been talking. We miss you. We miss family. The word hung there, raw, unfinished. Jonathan stared again at the empty chair. For months, he had prayed for exactly this, for the wall to crack, for the silence to break. And yet now that it had, he felt fear rise with his hope. Rick continued, Emma's making that pot roast you love. Tonight, please come. Let's start over. Jonathan swallowed hard. The soup before him had lost its purpose. The house felt colder, smaller. Margaret's voice whispered in memory, families find their way back if you let them. What time? 7:30. I'll text you the address. The line went quiet except for the faint rush of Rick's breath. Jonathan held the receiver a moment longer, as though pressing it to his ear could keep his wife's words alive, could keep his son from drifting away again. Finally, he set it down. The photograph beside the salt shaker caught the kitchen light, Margaret's eyes sparkling in captured memory. Jonathan spoke to her picture, his voice steady now. Looks like it's time, love. I'm going. The camera would linger on the untouched second chair, the tick of the kitchen clock filling the silence, before cutting to black. The Uber slowed as streetlights flickered over manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. Jonathan sat rigid in the back seat, clutching the bottle of aged whiskey on his lap like a passport. He hadn't been to Montclair in years. The houses here looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Columns, fountains, glowing windows like golden eyes watching him arrive. He shifted in his seat, his suit jacket suddenly feeling too worn, too plain for this world. Beautiful neighborhood. The driver said, breaking the silence. Your son lives here. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Yes. He murmured, though the word tasted strange. The Rick he remembered had always been restless, chasing one scheme after another, moving apartments every few months. To see him in a place like this, it didn't make sense. Pride swelled, yes, but alongside it came something sharper unease. The car curved into a long driveway, tires crunching over stone. A mansion rose before him, its facade lit by hidden lamps, windows gleaming with curated warmth. The fountain at the center sprayed arcs of water into the night air, the sound elegant and theatrical. Jonathan's throat tightened. He thought of Margaret, of the tiny apartment where they'd raised Rick, where every paycheck stretched thin but laughter filled the cracks. She would have marveled at this house. He wanted to believe she'd be proud. The front door opened before he could even reach for the bell. Rick stepped out, his smile wide, his suit sharp. For a heartbeat, Jonathan's chest ached with pure fatherly pride. His son looked like the success he'd always dreamed of becoming. Dad, Rick said, voice warm, almost desperate. He pulled Jonathan into an embrace that lasted a beat too long. When he let go, his eyes darted, searching Jonathan's face as if measuring his reaction. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and rosemary. A grand chandelier glittered above, its light catching on marble floors. Emma appeared with the poise of someone who had rehearsed her role as hostess. She kissed Jonathan's cheek, her perfume expensive and deliberate. "You look wonderful," she said smoothly, her hand lingering on his arm. "We're so happy you're here." Jonathan offered the whiskey, the peace offering he'd carried across the city. Rick's eyes lit up too quickly, his grip firm as he accepted it. "Perfect," Rick said. "We'll open it right now." Maria, the housekeeper, appeared silently to take Jonathan's coat. Her smile was kind, but her eyes flickered with something else, caution, warning. It vanished before Jonathan could be sure. They led him into a dining room that looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot. Crystal glasses, folded napkins, candles glowing low. Jonathan sat, trying to settle the storm inside him. Pride, guilt, hope. The weight of years lost pressed against his chest, but for the first time in months, he let himself believe. Maybe tonight would bring his family back. Yet as Rick poured the first glasses of whiskey, Jonathan noticed Maria's hands tremble slightly when she set down the appetizers. She glanced at him, just for a second, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't, and then she was gone. The crystal glass in front of him caught the light, amber swirling inside. The tick of the chandelier above sounded like a clock counting down. The dinner unfolded like theater. Every detail too polished, every gesture just a little too rehearsed. Emma laughed at all the right moments, asked all the right questions. Rick kept Jonathan's glass filled before he could even realize it was empty. The pot roast tasted exactly like Margaret's recipe. That was what unsettled him most. He hadn't shared that secret with anyone but his wife. How could Emma know the precise blend of rosemary and thyme Margaret used? He chewed slowly, unease spreading like the warmth of the whiskey in his veins. Maria drifted between rooms like a shadow. Jonathan noticed her hands tremble again when she set down the bread. When their eyes met briefly, she gave the smallest shake of her head, so subtle he wondered if he'd imagined it. "Dad," Rick said, cutting through the silence. "We've wasted too much time apart. You shouldn't be working so hard anymore. You've built something incredible, but it's time to think about the future." Emma leaned in, her smile soft but sharp at the edges. "Succession planning, legal documents, things that protect what you've worked for. You deserve to rest." Jonathan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Retirement. Power of attorney. These weren't the words of a son yearning for reconciliation. They were business terms, calculations. For the first time since stepping into the house, a chill ran down his spine. He reached for his water, trying to steady himself. That was when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen under the tablecloth. An unfamiliar number, local code, but not one he recognized. The message appeared in stark, black letters: "Get up. Leave now. Say nothing to your son." His chest constricted. He read it again, certain he'd misread. But the words stayed, cold and urgent. His heart pounded against his ribs. "Everything all right, Dad?" Rick's voice carried a note of concern that sounded too polished, like a salesman pretending to care. Jonathan slipped the phone back into his pocket, forcing a smile. Just the restaurant. Managers probably asking about the late shift. But his hand trembled against the linen. His head swam heavier than it should have. 2 glasses of whiskey shouldn't have blurred the edges of the room. Emma's eyes tracked him carefully, too carefully. "You look pale. Maybe some air?" "Yes," Jonathan said quickly. He rose, steadying himself on the table. The chandelier light seemed too bright, burning into his eyes. The room tilted just slightly under his feet. "Second door on the left." Rick offered smoothly, pointing toward the hallway. "Bathroom's right there. Take your time." Jonathan nodded, but instead of turning left, his instincts pulled him straight toward the kitchen. Maria stood at the sink, scrubbing crystal glasses with too much force. She didn't look at him, didn't speak, but her shoulders tightened as he passed. Beyond her, a back door glowed faintly with motion sensor light from the garden. Jonathan's pulse roared in his ears. The anonymous warning burned in his memory. "Get up, leave now." He pushed the door open. Cold air rushed against his face like a verdict. The night air hit Jonathan like a slap. He staggered into the garden, shoes sinking slightly into the damp grass. The mansion's windows glowed behind him, warm, inviting, false. Every instinct screamed at him to keep walking, to reach the street, to vanish. But another part of him, the part that had raised a boy into a man, whispered, "Don't run yet. Understand first." He pulled his phone out with trembling hands. Another message waited. "The whiskey is poisoned. They want your signature. Don't go back." Jonathan's knees nearly buckled. The heaviness in his head, the unnatural haze. It wasn't age or nerves. His own son had spiked the drink he'd brought as an offering of peace. A cruel irony. He dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, calm, low, deliberate. You listened. Good. You'd already be signing papers if you hadn't. Who is this? Jonathan hissed. His throat was dry, words scraping. Why are you? You don't need my name. Only the truth. Your son owes millions. He's desperate. He and his wife plan to drug you, make you sign everything over. Power of attorney, transfer of assets. By the time you sobered, it would all be gone. And legally airtight. Jonathan pressed a hand against the cold iron of the garden fence, steadying himself. You're lying, Rick. He's made mistakes, but he wouldn't. The voice cut him off. Look at the glass next time. Tiny sediment swirling. That's not age, not dust. That's the drug. Jonathan's breath caught. He remembered the glint of particles when Rick set down his drink. A detail he'd brushed away as nothing. My son. The words tore from him, half whisper, half plea. He's my son. Silence. Then the voice, softer now. And yet, he's willing to bury you alive in contracts to save himself. Believe what you see, not what you wish for. The line went dead. Jonathan stood frozen, the garden lights buzzing faintly above him. He felt Margaret's absence like never before. Her steady presence, her way of seeing through Rick's half-truths, her ability to forgive and still hold firm. Without her he was a man alone, forced to face the monster his son had become. From inside the house, laughter echoed, forced, brittle. Emma's voice floated through the open kitchen window. He's taking too long. What if he knows? Rick replied, sharp and low. He doesn't. He never does. Dad's always been soft. That's why this will work. The words shattered something inside Jonathan. He pressed back against the fence, fighting to breathe. 1,000 memories rushed in. The boy who once clung to his leg during thunderstorms, who begged for one more bedtime story, who swore he'd make them proud. And now that boy was plotting his father's ruin. Jonathan's phone buzzed again. Another message. Leave now, or go back prepared. Decide fast. They'll come looking. His eyes lifted to the house. Through the glass, he could see Rick pacing, Emma wringing her hands. Maria hovered in the background, face pale, watching. Jonathan wiped at his eyes, jaw tightening. Running meant safety. Going back meant danger. But also truth, confrontation, justice. He closed his fist around the phone. Margaret. He whispered into the night. Tell me what to do. Jonathan stepped back into the dining room, every nerve screaming. The warmth that had once felt like reconciliation now pressed down like theater lights, exposing every false smile. There you are. Emma said brightly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. We were just about to send Rick to check on you. Rick forced a laugh, the sound brittle. Thought you'd gotten lost in this place. His hand tapped the table, restless, betraying nerves. Jonathan lowered himself into the chair at the head of the table, as if nothing had changed. He kept his expression neutral, masking the storm inside. Rick moved quickly to the liquor cabinet, pouring 3 fresh glasses of whiskey. His back was too stiff, his motions too precise. Jonathan watched closely. The liquid in his own glass caught the chandelier light, and there it was. Sediment, tiny flecks swirling like secrets. Emma leaned forward, her smile too eager. One last toast before dessert. To new beginnings. Jonathan lifted the glass, steady hand betraying none of the turmoil in his chest. He swirled it, letting the particles dance in the light. To beginnings. He echoed softly, then set the glass back down untouched. His gaze fixed on Rick. You were 6 when I taught you how to ride a bike. Jonathan began, voice steady. Do you remember? You fell 3 times, scraped your knees raw. But you got back on, because you trusted me to hold the seat. Trusted me not to let you fall. Rick's jaw clenched. Dade, I never let you fall, Jonathan continued. His hand rested on the glass, unmoving. Not once. And yet here we are. You, pouring poison into my drink. You waiting for me to sign away everything your mother and I built with our hands. Emma stiffened, her painted smile dissolving. Jonathan, that's... Don't. Jonathan cut sharply. His eyes burned into Rick's. I heard you. Out in the garden. He never knows. He's soft. That's what you said. You were wrong. I know now. And I will never forgive this. The silence that followed was unbearable, a taut wire ready to snap. Rick's hands trembled as he reached across the table, desperation breaking through his mask. Dad, please. You don't understand. They'll kill me if I don't pay. The knock came like thunder. 3 hard strikes rattled the doorframe. Police! Open up! Emma gasped, rising to her feet. Rick froze, eyes wide. Jonathan leaned back, exhaling slowly, at last releasing the storm he'd carried since the phone first buzzed. They understand enough, he said quietly. The front door burst open, officers flooding the hall. Shouts filled the mansion, commands crisp and unrelenting. Rick stumbled back as handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Emma cried out, her voice shrill and cracking. Jonathan remained seated at the head of the table, staring at the poisoned glass before him. The amber liquid shimmered under the chandelier, flecks of betrayal suspended inside. He didn't lift it. He didn't need to. The truth was already bitter enough to swallow. The mansion's glow had lost its charm. Red and blue lights painted the marble walls with brutal honesty, flashing through the windows in fractured rhythms. Rick's voice echoed down the hallway, a mix of pleading and fury, each word breaking against the inevitability of steel cuffs. Emma's sobs splintered into the air, brittle as glass. Jonathan sat still at the table, the poisoned whiskey untouched before him. He studied it the way a man studies a coffin, knowing it was meant for him, yet unwilling to let it bury him. His reflection wavered in the amber liquid, fragmented, like a man trying to recognize himself after too much loss. Maria appeared quietly at the doorway. No uniform, no mask of hospitality now, just a woman whose conscience had forced her to act. Her eyes met Jonathan's with a steadiness he hadn't seen all evening. "It was you," he said softly. Not a question. Her silence was confirmation enough. She stepped forward, hands folded, posture humble but unflinching. "I couldn't let them do it. You've always treated people with dignity, Mr. Miller. Even me. They didn't think I was listening, but I was." Jonathan's throat tightened. Gratitude swelled, but it carried the weight of sorrow. "You saved my life. My own son tried to end it. And you," he exhaled, shaking his head. "You risked everything to warn me." Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "Sometimes strangers honor family better than blood." The words pierced him deeper than Rick's betrayal. He thought of Margaret, of her faith that families found their way back. Tonight proved her wrong. Or perhaps it proved that family was never about blood alone. It was about loyalty, truth, the courage to protect when no one else would. Officers passed through the room, evidence bags rustling, clipped voices reporting. One paused, lifting the glass of whiskey into a sealed container. Jonathan watched it disappear, a relic of a moment when everything he believed about his son shattered. Later, when the house had emptied of sirens and uniforms, Jonathan stepped outside. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain on stone. Across the lawn, the fountain still spilled water in elegant arcs, as though nothing had happened. Beauty masking rot. He pulled Margaret's photo from his wallet, the edges worn soft from years of handling. The smile in that picture no longer gave him comfort. It demanded courage. "I held on, love," he whispered, "even when it broke me." Behind him, Maria waited at the steps, hesitant. "Do you want me to call you a car, sir?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, I'll walk to the corner. I need air." He turned one last time toward the mansion. Its grandeur now hollow, its lights harsh, its silence louder than any storm. Then he walked into the night, not toward the past he'd lost, but toward something unformed, something still possible. The camera would linger on his back, solitary yet upright, framed against the city's distant glow. Because sometimes survival isn't triumph. Sometimes it's simply the choice to keep walking,